Good morning, everybody. It is a beautiful Saturday morning, and it is a beautiful Science Saturday. So, I know that I'm always excited, but today we're getting like super sciencey. So, we are down at the beautiful Brewers Bay, and that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing today. We just wanted a really beautiful setting because today we are dissecting a lionfish. So, lionfish are invasive. A lot of us know that. And we're going to learn a lot more, but specifically about the anatomy of the lionfish and different parts of the anatomy that might make it more suited to be a voracious predator and really successful invasive. So, we are here today with our favorite Science Saturday intern. Hey, Mason.
Hi.
Hey. And our lionfish extraordinaire expert, Jason.
Morning, everyone.
So I am going to step aside and let's get started. You guys ready? I am. And we have Joe back behind the camera. Hey, Joe.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to start off by just talking about the lionfish in general. Um, these are invasive fish to the Caribbean waters. They were first introduced um, in the mid 1980s, believed to be through the aquarium trade, and fish being released back into the wild. But off the coast of Florida is not the native range for these fish. They do really well in just about any depth. They can be found in very shallow waters, down to over 1,000 feet. They tolerate pretty diverse temperature ranges. They have the ability to eat a lot of different species of fish, and because they're invasive, a lot of native fish species don't see them as being a predator. So I think it just kind of makes the job easier for the lionfish. So they're voracious predators, and they can reproduce every 2 weeks. Females can release up to 30,000 eggs every time they reproduce, and that comes out to about 2 million eggs a year.
Whoa,
So
that's a lot.
that's,
Smush, can you imagine 2 million eggs a year? What do you think that looks like? Too many lionfish, yeah.
So they don't have any natural predators in this invasive range, in their home range. Some of the normal predators like the snappers and the groupers and even trumpet fish help to just maintain the population, just like in our local waters. There's a balance of the different species based on the predators in the area. Now we go out and we try to actively remove lionfish from our reefs, mostly divers using spears, and we do that throughout the Virgin Islands. And I know there's a lot of other islands in the Keys and Florida that does that as well. And so we take down these large containers or makeshift versions that protect us from these venomous spines. So once we spear the fish, we're able to put this fish inside of the container, and that'll protect us from getting punctured by the venomous spines during our dive. Okay, so it's very important to state that lionfish are venomous. They're not poisonous. So venom is something that has to be injected into your bloodstream. So, like a snake bite or a lionfish spine or a bee sting, that's all venom. Okay, so that's a very popular misconception, is that they are poisonous. Now, lionfish have 13 dorsal spines here. So these are the really big ones. And then under here we have their pelvic spines. And so each side, there's one on each side on the leading edge. And then we have the anal spines all the way in the back. So there's 3 of those. 1, 2, 3. So there's 18 spines total. Now, this caudal fin doesn't have any spines. The soft dorsal here doesn't have any spines. And then there's these big pectoral fins here on the side. Those also don't have any spines. Okay, so the ones that we're really concerned with are the dorsal, the pelvic, and the anal spines. Okay. So before we do the dissection, what we're going to do is we're going to remove those spines, just because after a while I'll probably get a little careless and stab myself, so I want to avoid that. Some other things to note on the lionfish. You see it more once they get a little bit larger, like this one here, but they get these operculum spines on their face. So these are not venomous.
Spikes.
Yeah, they're just kind of spiky. But that's why part of the reason I'm wearing the glove is because after handling that for a while, it can make your fingers a little sore. Sometimes, especially on the smaller ones, you'll get these ocular antennae that come out from right above the eyes, but a lot of times you don't see it in the larger fish. And that's something that probably gets damaged during its lifetime, from feeding. And then they also have some down by their mouth here. And they believe these and the ones that are on the tentacle are to help with the lionfish hunting. So they have these really large pectoral fins here. And when you normally see them out underwater, their fins are out and they look like a really large fish to us. But to prey, they may look like the rest of the reef. They may look like a gorgonian or some place where a small fish can hide. And so the lionfish just kind of lays in wait, and then, as I said before, they don't prey items don't typically see them as being a predator, and then they just gobble them right up. And so they're pretty voracious predators. They consume about 90 different species on the reef, including small snappers and grunts and groupers. They also will eat different types of shrimp, including cleaner shrimp, which our local species rely on for getting clean to stay healthy. So that's another issue. And then, they're also really pretty fish. Once we bring them up to the surface, they don't look quite as large, not just because they're not magnified anymore, but because all their fins are laying down. And so a lot of times when we're removing them underwater, they appear much, much larger than we expect.
That sounds like the typical fisherman story.
Sure.
Yeah,
it was this big.
And then you can also see the lateral line on the lionfish, which is, part of a sensory organ, and so they can detect water movement and changes. And so that's something that you will see across most fish species. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by just removing the venomous spines.
All right, we're going in close. We're going to stay focused on the lionfish now.
And we'll hopefully be able to put these spines under the microscope for you guys to see. Okay. And so we're just going to remove the whole top dorsal area.
So now that these spines are being removed, Smush Mason, do you think that there is anything we need to worry about with the fish? What else needs to be cut off?
The other spines.
Right.
Say it again. What were you saying, Mace?
The others. I would
You know
say
what those are called?
the anal spines.
That's
and
right.
the dorsal.
So we got the dorsal spines. These were the pelvic spines.
Oh yeah, the pelvic.
Now we're going to get those anal spines off. There we go. All right, so now this fish is safe to handle without worry of being envenomated. Joe, would you like to move any of these spines over to the other camera for now, or you want to wait till the end?
Still getting set up, so why don't we go ahead and keep going, and I'll let you know when that's ready.
Sure.
Make sure Okay.
All right, now for getting access to the internal organs, we're going to start right here by the vent. So this is your genital tract. And the reason it's partially bloated like this is because it was speared at about 30 feet of depth. So bringing that to the surface, any gas that was inside of its swim bladder will expand, and it'll cause the body to blow up like that. So we're cutting forward to the pelvic spines, and then once we get all the way forward, we're going to have the pelvic girdle that we're going to have to chomp through with the bigger scissors. There it is.
And while Jason's cutting through that, I want to point out that the dissection kit we are using today was purchased with a grant from the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands. Love you guys. So many fun tools that we have for all of our Science Saturdays thanks to that partnership. And having the right tool for the job is very important, makes it safer. As you can see, they are already dealing with a venomous fish and also working with sharp objects. We want to make sure that we are safe and proper.
You guys see that okay?
Zoom in a little bit.
Whoa.
So what are we looking at, Jason?
All right.
You can get even tighter, I think.
All right, guys. So one of the first big things that we will see here is the liver. It looks like our stomach is full, so that's actually going to be interesting when we get to doing our stomach content analysis. So we've got the liver here. You can see the heart in here connected to where the gills and the gill rakers are. This inflated area, that's the swim bladder. And then,
Can you touch it?
Can I touch it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, smush. Poke gently. So that's filled with air.
That's right, and it's
Crazy.
filled with gas. And then back here along the swim bladder, that is the gonad, so that's a reproductive organ for this fish. Now, because it's like long and slender like that, and you can kind of see there's like a sharp edge to it, this is actually a male lionfish. This is a reproductive sized male lionfish. Now, if it were a female lionfish, we would also see you know, the egg sac. You would see her gonads, and should be on each side. Yeah, but you can see it on the other side there, maybe. And sometimes when we cut them open like this, we see eggs in the egg sac. So we might see eggs developing. We may see eggs that are ready to be released. So she's actively spawning. So there's like four different like categories of development that we may see with the females. And so the first one being if they are very young, and it's actually really difficult to tell the difference between the male and the female gonads when they're still going through that development process. So that would be like the very first stage. Males are pretty much, you know, they're very young and they can't reproduce yet, or you can see that their gonads are developed and ready for reproduction. Females, the second, would be more of a developmental. You can see that they're starting to grow. The third stage would be that they are starting to produce the eggs, and you should actually be able to feel the eggs within that egg sac. And then finally, if they're actively developing, you will be very obvious.
So how quickly does that happen? Do they approach that maturity?
So it seems to go by size, and so once they get to about 18 centimeters, so figure if this fish were about right here, that would be about reproductive size. So a fish that's in an area where they have access to more readily available food, you know, they'll grow faster and potentially reproduce or become reproductive sooner. All right. Now, as we look through the lionfish, we might actually see some interstitial fat as well. So you'll see fat that is attached to the organs, and to some of this white stuff right here. If this is, you know, the fish is starting to defrost now, so the fat is getting a little bit liquidy. But you have fat that attaches to the outside of the organs. And they find that the lionfish in the Caribbean, the invasive lionfish, you know, have a higher fat content than in their native range because they're eating more. And in some cases, they're seeing lionfish that actually have liver disease.
Oh, freaks.
So they're eating themselves to death.
Yeah, so that's caused by overeating. That causes that liver disease.
Yes.
It's not healthy that they're good enough at hunting that they can overeat.
Oh, it sounds like us. All right. So what we're gonna do?
Same lionfish. I also will eat forever.
So we're gonna try to separate some of these organs out because what we want to do is get to that stomach and see what's inside. Now, when we get inside the stomach, depending on how digested the contents are, we might be able to see what species of fish this one has been eating lately. Now, the area this fish was collected on the south side of St. John was a very fishy area. There's lots of different species of fish, lots of grunts and snappers. Ooh, wow, I think we're going to be in luck here, guys.
Readjusting the camera. Okay.
Oh, man.
Oh no.
We're going to open this up so we don't damage the fish. Now,
We do not have to put
Mason,
this
you
one
wanna
under the
try and see if you can
microscope.
help him out there?
What happened?
we're just going to try to cut this guy out. Now, this is you know, the lionfish stomach here. Now, we're talking about how well they can hunt and also how much they eat. These guys can eat so much that they can expand their stomach up to 30 times. All right, so if we look in here, we're talking about some of those shrimp, right? So there we go. We have a couple shrimp in here.
Here, why don't you put those in the vial so we can count them up? So one at a time, you can put them in there.
Go ahead.
Mason, yeah, there you go.
Now, can we figure out what kind of fish this is? This actually kind of looks like a little hamlet to me. What do you think, Joe?
Oh, it's so hard to say.
Yeah. So at this point, you know, we could probably figure out what it is to the family level, maybe not to the species. And there's some more shrimp. That might, yeah.
It's not a wrasse. I don't think it's too wide.
Yeah, but I'm looking at this tail.
Could be, yeah, maybe a damsel or a hamlet, a really small one.
Yes, this guy's pretty far gone. So we'll say that this is probably...
Maybe even a tail? No, wrong tail for a tail.
Yeah. No, this it's very high arch on the back here. Still kind of thinking it could potentially be a hamlet, small hamlet.
Very small.
Yeah, which is a serenid. Related to our groupers. I'll just take this out of my hand. So one of the things that we could do, we got a couple more in here if you want to keep poking at it.
Yeah, how many shrimp are we up to?
Yeah.
3.
So some of the things that we can do is, you know, if we're trying to collect this data on the lionfish, is we collect all of these little bits of the fish and the shrimp that are in there, and then we weigh it out. We try to figure out what species or family they are, and then we weigh it out to see, you know, what weight in grams the lionfish had consumed and was actively in the stomach. And then we can go through and we can also cut out some of that interstitial fat that's in there, and we can weigh that out and just see what the fat content of the lionfish is.
Or shrimp.
Yeah.
Oh, should I put the top on?
Yeah, I think. Oh, you want to put the fish in there too?
Okay. Should the fish go in a different one?
I guess if we have another one, we could do another one.
We have two. You can separate them.
Yeah. And then I think the professional term for this here is called mush.
Mush.
And that is like the final stage of the digestion where it's just not identifiable. All right. So moving on. Let's cut this open a little bit more. All right. Everyone get to see the gills. You know, it had very pretty looking gills. Sometimes I like to check to see if there's any parasites in the gills. I've only found that on very few occasions.
So they rarely get parasites in their gills, which is something that could potentially control them.
Correct. And I have never seen one actively using a cleaner station. You can see some of the other digestive. You can see the the intestine tract, and then you can see that swim bladder fully inflated. Okay.
What would happen if we were to pop
do all fish use a swim bladder?
Not all fish. Not all fish swim actively in the water.
What would happen if we were to pop the swim bladder?
It would just pop.
Would it make a noise?
Maybe.
Would it be satisfying?
Maybe to some people.
Can we pop it?
I don't want to pop it right now.
How about at the end?
Okay.
But what I'm going to do now is we're gonna cut off the head of the fish, and we're gonna try to get in to the otic bulb, so that we can get the otolith out and put that under the microscope. And the otolith, there are two otoliths that we're going to try to get, and they kind of free float on either side of the lionfish's brain, and we can put that under the microscope, and kind of like the rings of a tree, we may be able to see the rings and see about how old this lionfish is.
Ooh, I'm so close to catching a fly with the tweezers.
Okay, there we go.
Here goes the head. It really just cuts right through the spine.
Yeah, so lionfish are among the family of bony fish. That's why they have bones just like we do. Not all fish do. There's some fish that are called cartilaginous fish, and those are like our sharks and our rays and our skates. And so they don't have the same sort of dense bone that we have.
They just have cartilage.
I hope I didn't cut back too far, guys.
They're not quite super bony fish, but they're not quite invertebrate.
Right, so invertebrate versus vertebrate, all fish have a spinal cord, and that's what makes them vertebrates.
Yeah.
Just not all of them use calcium for their bones. And it has advantages, right? You have more structure, more support, more protection, right? You notice that this head is really, really bony. There's a lot of protection around that head. That's another thing that they use for their defense, in addition to those spines, in addition to those, hello world. In addition to those spines, that spiky cheek mail, we'll hear it called, like a knight's mail, chain mail. So all of that feeds into the defense and what allows them to really survive really well when they're facing off against predators, other fish, or even us as predators when we're trying to remove them. One thing we talk a lot about is when we are spearing them, we have to keep our spears really sharp, because if you try and hit a lionfish with a dull spear, it'll just bounce off their bony skull.
Really?
Yeah, and then they'll just get mad at you. And then the other problem is once they start realizing that we're hunting them, they'll start getting more and more aloof, which is why it's really important to go through.
Aloof?
They'll try and run away. They'll get wise to the game, right? So we want to be really cognizant of that, so that whenever we see a lionfish, we want to make sure that whoever's trying to remove it is going to be well equipped to do so, because it's just going to make it harder for that lionfish to get removed later.
Right, and we also don't want to, we're not trying to go down there and name the fish or anything like that. We're trying to.
Ooh.
Yep, there you go. I'll work on it.
Oh, and it's gone.
Here it is. I'll work.
All right. While Joe is working on getting that on the microscope, what else are you finding in there? So.
I just found a brain.
Oh. Let's zoom.
Let the scarecrow know.
You see that?
Zoom in even more.
Oh, you're very smart.
Oh, he's smart enough to
Compared to us,
be
at
taking over
least,
the
it's
Caribbean.
Oh, too much zoom. Okay. All right, I'm at a good zoom. Poke it again.
So we can see the brain matter right there.
What is that?
That is the otolith. We'll get there in just a second.
Oh, cool. See if I can get the other one out. I might have knocked it out when I was opening it up. So there's actually 6 otoliths. We're grabbing like the two largest ones. I think I knocked the other one out already. It's all right. We got that one. And these are the sagittal otoliths. And so these are going to be the easiest ones for us to remove. It'd be cool to get a shot of just how small that is on there.
So I'm gonna go to our microscope view. Let's see. There you go. So everyone's seeing basically this little microscope screen now. That's kind of what they're seeing.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So what does that tell us?
So that's made of
Bone.
right.
Yeah.
And it's you know, we can collect those from the fish that we remove, and over time collect data on the age ranges of the lionfish in the area.
So this is it's a tiny little bone that actually lives in fish have ears, little inner ears, not external ears like what we see. And the interesting thing about this bone is it sits kind of by itself, just kind of floating in a bunch of other muscle and tissue. And the reason fish scientists really, or ichthyologists, I should use their real term, the reason this is so useful for them is every year, as the fish grows, and even if it doesn't grow, it adds a little bit more of hard bone onto that otolith, onto that ear bone. And so by actually going to an even more powerful microscope, and you can slice this through and you can see how much, based on the size of the otolith, how many years, like rings on a tree, how old that fish is, how long that fish has been alive. And so this is one of the standard tools for pretty much across the world for scientists using to age fish. Unfortunately, we can't just remove an otolith from a fish and have it walk away. You see the process that's involved. So we use other proxies like size, behavior, maturity, to kind of get a better idea of what the fish is like. But this is one of the most reliable ways to actually get the actual certain age of a fish.
Cool.
And so we can use this to sample a few fish and get an idea of the approximate age of the population.
All right.
All right, careful not to move it.
Whoa.
The tiny little.
So that's where it started, yep.
red thing,
And they're very fragile.
and then it grows out.
Yep, and every year it gets a little bit bigger.
So,
All right.
what age do you think this one would be?
Well, we might need a little bit more powerful of a microscope for that. And I am also not a trained ichthyologist. But
So just kind of the common information that's been spread around is that with the females anyway, they can be mature in less than a year. So remember, again, that's about 180 millimeters, and
18 centimeters or
and
6 to 7 inches.
right.
For
Yeah,
us
so about
Americans.
about 7 inches, and that's not very large. This is larger than 7 inches. I know we didn't measure it out before, but
go
this
back
was
to our
probably
dissection
around around a 10-inch lionfish. So that's a pretty common size that we find around here.
In the shallows.
In the shallow areas, around the inshore reefs, some of the offshore wrecks, they seem to like to hang out. They like that type of structure, and we may find larger ones there. And very often offshore, we see mostly large ones. So anywhere between 11 and 16, 17 inches. So very, very large. Larger than they would be found in their native home range.
Yeah, can we talk extremes for a second? what's the smallest lionfish you've ever seen and the biggest lionfish you've ever seen or heard of here in the Virgin Islands?
The largest I've heard of here is was 17.5 inches. The smallest I've seen.
Smallest or biggest verified, because
Right, that
there's
was
a lot of fishing stories out there.
verified. I did get one myself that was 17 1/4, and we have that measured out with the measuring, a picture of it measured out. And then smallest one, probably just about an inch to an inch and a half. When they're really small, their coloration is much lighter, and they still in the water appear to be large with their pectoral fins out and their spines up. But once you do remove them, they look not too different from the fish that were removed from the stomach of this lionfish. They're just really tiny fish, and the small ones are especially hard to get just because they're so small. It's a very small target. And it's often easier to get them with just a net, just kind of scoop them up.
And Jason, you do a lot of diving with the university. You go all over the island. What are some of the crazy places that you found lionfish that you didn't expect to?
So we do some of the diving offshore, like on the shelf edge on the south side, and there's a lot of large predatory fish out there, like large snappers. There are sharks, there are big groupers, things like that. And the populations offshore, I tend to find higher densities in smaller areas versus what we find on the inshore reefs. And then we do find them on wrecks. We find them over by marinas, under fishing boats, or under boats that are in marinas. I've seen video of them a couple hundred feet underwater with ROVs, and they can be found just about anywhere. They're pretty tolerable with even salinity changes. So they can survive in pretty high salinity and low salinity compared to some of our other reef fish around here.
How cold of water can they survive in?
They have. So
north?
last that I saw, they had found them up towards like New York, which water temperatures are below 50 degrees.
The Labrador current.
Yeah, but they can. They don't. The warmer the water, the better that they would be at reproducing. They reproduce in warmer climates, and so once they get on that more extreme edge of their range and probably depth as well, they probably reproduce a lot less. So we're kind of in an area where they probably reproduce fairly often, and then sometimes we'll find these areas where we have a dense population of lionfish, and we've removed all of them, and we'll find that most of them are female. So you might have maybe just one or just a few males and a lot of reproductive ready females that are hanging out in the same area. When they do spawn, the egg sac floats up to the surface and disperses, and it floats around, floating in the water for about 30 days before they start settling. So it's about 3 to 4 weeks before they start settling, and then we could completely eradicate the lionfish problem here in the Virgin Islands, but if there's another area that is upstream that still has lionfish that are reproducing, those could very easily start settling back down on our reefs. So over the years, especially from our volunteer divers around, we've seen a big reduction in lionfish on the inshore reefs, on our popular dive sites, on the wrecks around. They have become a popular food item as well in a lot of areas. We eat them at home whenever we get them, and there's always a concern of ciguatoxin, fish poisoning locally, and that's a concern that you have to take into consideration with any reef fish that you eat. So if you want to try the taste of lionfish, I know some of the local fishermen will catch them. If you get fish from your local fishermen. They know the good spots to, you know, catch fish that won't get you sick, and that would be the best place to go get them.
Which parts can you eat?
So,
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the part of the dissection I want to get to.
So I think that this is a really good segue that we moved into eating them. So I know with the dissection, we didn't clean it as if we were going to fillet it, but if we could get just a little bit of meat off of there, I think I can go into my ceviche demonstration.
Important part of science, of course,
Is
what can
eating.
we eat?
Yes.
So,
All right. So as Jason cleans this off, you guys are just, you know, seeing the board here, and then we'll trade places and I'll finish it out.
Well, while Jason's finishing up that cleaning, we did have a question from the audience. Joanne Renee was asking if we're going to be doing this again anytime soon.
Oh.
I think it referenced Science Saturday.
Yeah.
Lionfish dissection.
So Science Saturday is the first Saturday, second Saturday. Wow. Hi, my name is Kitty and I run Science Saturday for 5 years. The second Saturday of every month we do Science Saturday. However, the lionfish dissection is just one of many topics that we cover. And if you're interested in learning more, you can absolutely, you know, talk to your local fishermen when you are purchasing them wherever you are, whether it's here in the U.S. Virgin Islands or throughout the Caribbean or in the States. And we are always accepting new topics for Science Saturday. So, you know, let us know what you want to hear about.
So now Jason is approaching the fillet. Starts with the removal of the skin, and you could just peel that right off. There's no descaling really needed, which is really nice.
so these lionfish have these tiny little cycloid scales. So it makes it a lot easier if you just peel the skin off, and then you don't have to worry about any of the scales. And I am terrible at filleting. I'm just letting everyone know.
And I will say, for all the lionfish that I have captured, I fillet every single one 3 inches to 3 feet.
3 feet?
I tell everyone that I caught a 3-foot one, but that's why I said only verified reports.
Unverified 3-foot lionfish,
Yes,
filleted
absolutely.
by
Pictures
Joe
or it
Townsend.
didn't happen, Joe.
Oh, I ate it all. Sorry. And so fishermen will sometimes capture and sell these. Is that correct, Jason?
That's right. So Saturday mornings down at Frenchtown is a normal day for selling fish, and actually down by the Lionel Roberts Stadium, you'll see fishermen down there. Now they don't always have lionfish available. There are some fishermen that will provide lionfish to restaurants, and so some of the restaurants around the island will have them available for consumption. And so if you're interested in trying lionfish, you can try checking out those restaurants, or stop by one of the local fisherman market areas and see what they have available. And lastly, if you had any interest in going out and trying to get your own lionfish, you can go on the Core website, which is corevi.org, and you can sign up for one of our trainings. And we have training available on St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. And we train our responders to go out and safely remove lionfish from waters around here. And we teach them about where the lionfish came from, and how to handle them properly. And and we also have a reporting form on there. So if you're snorkeling or diving around and you happen to come across a lionfish, you can go on that same website. There's a giant red button that says submit, and you can submit where you saw that lionfish, and that will alert our responders about where to go out and find them. Because we'll sometimes go out and not see any, which is great, but if there's any around, we want to make sure we can go out and get them.
All right, Kitty. So that was interesting, but what's going on here?
All right, so we are
here?
doing
Get it all mixed
a
together?
little ceviche demonstration. So I brought a jar with just olive oil and some rice vinegar, because I think that is delicious. In our seasoning bags here, we have salt, and I went with cayenne pepper today. So, Smush, you want to pour some of that in?
Okay.
Not too much.
How much?
That's up to you, Ben.
I mean, I'm not gonna be eating it.
How salty, spicy?
Yeah, how salty spicy?
I mean, if I'm not eating it, it can be very salty spicy.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going to chop up a little bit of local ginger. Now, the fun part about ceviche is that it is actually cooked through the acid in the vinegar. Last time we did a lionfish demonstration, I picked a bitter orange from the yard and we used that. How we look? Oh, salty spicy. And now I got a little bit of ginger and I grabbed a little bit of cilantro, and also shout out to our favorite scientist Joe Townsend, who got me these bags for Christmas last year before last.
All
Year
part of the
before
Science
that.
Saturday effort.
Right? They're actually tea bags, but I think that they are super for carrying spices for little to-go lunches. We're gonna throw some cilantro in there. All right, what do you think? Shaken or stirred? Okay.
You got it, Mason.
All
You're
right,
on it.
shake it. So right now, this is raw because this is not enough time in the vinegar to cook. However, depending on your preference for how cooked you want your fish, you could leave this 30 minutes, an hour, overnight. That would be pretty cooked. All right, we ready to taste? All right, so I did not. Now this is actually really fun. If we look in, you can see that the outside of the flesh is already a little bit white. That is the process of that already starting to cook. Pretty neat, huh? So ideally, we're gonna let this go a little bit longer, but just in the name of science, I'm gonna go ahead and take a piece. Let's see here. And on behalf of Science Saturday, Coastal Zone Management, all of our friends, Get In Here Smush, I want to thank everyone for a phenomenal Science Saturday. Thanks to Jason for coming out here on a Saturday morning and doing the dissection with us. And I hope that everyone has an amazing month. Mmm, salty spicy. I love it. Delicious. See you guys next month. We're still going. All right, I'm gonna keep eating. Totally cooked.